Professor Ratan Lal Sahab, good morning.
Good morning. Good evening.
Yes. I think it is early morning there.
Yes, it's 8 o'clock, 8 a.m.
Yeah, I know. So thank you very much, sir. So
Yes.
with your kind permission, can we start?
I am ready. Yes, whenever you're ready.
I'm waiting for Dr. Mohapatra, but he will join subsequently.
Okay.
He's just going to join.
All right.
So good evening, friends, and welcome back to this important lecture series. And that lecture series is now very popular, and that is for a very noble cause, and it is to celebrate the India's glorious 75 years of independence. And for that, as you know, the ICAR has taken many initiatives. We have many Kisan Gostis, we have many special programs, and one of that program, which is very popular now, is to have the eminent personalities across the globe to interact and to give their views on different topics, including the research, including the policy, including the motivational lectures, including I can say even the yoga, COVID, many topics we had in the past. And in the same series, today we have the lecture number 56 by a very eminent person who doesn't require any introduction, Professor Ratan Lal, a very distinguished academician, a distinguished researcher. We welcome you, sir, for this important lecture series. And we know, you have a very hectic schedule, and we could snatch 1 hour from your schedule. So thank you very much, sir, for all your acceptance and for being ready to deliver this important lecture. Friends, as you know, Professor Ratan Lal is a laureate of Padma Shri Award in 2021 of the Government of India. The World Food Prize, I think, is the highest award a agriculture scientist can dream of. Then the RL Global Food Innovation Award in 2020 of Canada, Japan Prize, US Avasti IFPRI Prize of India, and then CH Hara World Food Prize 2018, Glinka World Soil Prize of FAO Rome in 2018, and many more to his cap. So we are really fortunate that such a personality is among us. Dr. Ratan Lal has mentored about 400 professionals from around the world, comprising of 115 graduate students, 170 visiting scholars, 56 postdoctoral researchers, 20 research scientists, and other advices. These scientists now comprise of a network of cooperators addressing global issues related to food and nutrition security, adaptation and mitigation of climate change, and restoration of degraded soils and ecosystem. The strategy is to make agriculture a solution to address climate change and other environmental issues. He has co-authored more than 1,000 peer-reviewed articles, a huge number, and co-authored and co-edited more than 100 books. I think nobody can even dream of writing so many books and so many research papers. Professor Ratan Lal is a distinguished university professor of soil science and director of CFAS Ratan Lal Center for Carbon Management and Sequestration at the OU State University. He is also the adjunct professor of the University of Iceland and the Indian Agriculture Research Institute, IARI, and a visiting professor at Pontifical Catholic University of Valparaiso in the Chile. Dr. Lal is recognized globally as a pioneer in soil-centric agricultural management to improve food security and develop climate-resilient agriculture through soil carbon sequestration, sustainable intensification, huge efficiency of agroecosystems, sustainable management, of soils and soil health. His career in soil science and international agricultural research spans over 5 decades and 4 continents. Huge accomplishment. Professor Ratan Lal has completed his education from Punjab Agricultural University, Ludhiana, BSc in 1963, Indian Agricultural Research Institute, New Delhi, MSc, and the Ohio State University, Columbus. He has done PhD in 1968. He was Senior Research Fellow with the University of Sydney, Australia, Soil Physicist at IITA, Ibadan, Nigeria, and Professor of Soil Science at OSU. He's continuing from 1987 onwards. Professor Ratan Lal sir, we are so grateful to you, and everybody is so eager to listen to you, to your views, which are of immense help to Indian agriculture. And I think we are all eagerly waiting for you. And our Director General also has joined, Dr. Mahapatra. So the floor is yours, Professor Ratan Lal sir. You can take your time, please.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
I have taken the Dr. Mahapatra and Dr. Agarwal and ICAR colleague. First of all, I'm grateful that you invited me to be a speaker at such an auspicious occasion, 75th anniversary. And it's really a privilege and honor, and I cannot thank you enough. I'm very grateful. I did record my lecture, and which is more focused on the topic that you suggested. And since I had already recorded it, I took the liberty of changing the subject somewhat. And therefore, you are going to probably hear a few different ideas. And the title is Managing Soils for Peace on the Planet. And you know why I changed the subject. I am not going to say anything who is right and who is wrong. But as a soil scientist, I think it's important I mention that it is affecting the world, and we have a responsibility to do something about it. In terms of humanity, the current situation, the only way to describe it is 3 C's. And those 3 C's are, of course, climate change, the conflict, and the COVID. And at the interaction of these 3 C's, humanity is having tremendous issues with refugees, hunger, malnutrition, inflation. I was very, very surprised and alarmed to listen to NPR news this morning, coming here about Sri Lanka, the soil and environmental degradation, and many other issues. And 7.9 billion human, each one of us is a victim, and each one of us is responsible. Therefore, we must do something about it. We must say something which is constructive and not necessarily accusational. I want to begin with climate change, which is a major issue, and these are interrelated issues. It's very hard to separate them. Before agriculture began about 10,000 years ago, the carbon stock in the atmosphere was 360 gigaton, petagram, billion tons. At the time of Industrial Revolution in 1750 circa, it was increased by 200 gigaton to 560. At present, it's approximately 880, and this has been contributed both from land use conversion and from fossil fuel combustion. Since the agriculture began, land use change and agricultural activity have contributed approximately 690 gigaton of carbon into the atmosphere. Some of it is retained in the atmosphere, not all of it. In addition to that, the fossil fuel combustion has contributed since 1750 something which is more accurate figure, 460 gigaton. The difference says that if we do agriculture properly, along with forestry and land restoration, some of that 690 gigaton that we lost can be put back. And I think it should be put back. And India has a long history of agriculture and can do a very important role in putting some of that carbon back. As of May 1, 2022, the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere was 420 parts per million. It's going up every year by 2.2 parts per million. And you notice the Keeling curve, it shows seasonal fluctuation. It's high in winter and low in summer. The reason it's low in summer in the northern hemisphere is because of the plant growth. The spring is coming up and the trees are now greening, and therefore they are taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and putting into the biomass. Consequently, the difference between winter and summer is dramatic. And this difference can be exploited properly to create a permanent drawdown of atmospheric CO2. That brings me to the question of a carbon pie. What's a carbon pie? We have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, 420 parts per million already. I mentioned that. I think the industrial concentration was 280 parts per million. Doubling of that to 560 is probably the upper limit that humanity and the planet can tolerate and still keep the 2 degrees centigrade warming under control. Therefore, the difference between the two, 560 minus 420, multiply by 2.13 gigaton for each 1 part per million increase in the atmosphere, equal to 302 gigaton. The question that Secretary General of the United Nations, and of course, Dr. Mahapatra and others should think about, this carbon pie of 302 gigaton, how do you divide it among 7.9 billion people? How do you divide it among approximately 200 nations of the world so that it's fair, it's equitable, it is just, it's transparent, and it is pro-planet and pro-agriculture? I think this is a very important question that we should consider on this auspicious occasion of the 75th anniversary. There are many options how to address that issue. Carbon dioxide sequestration, we have a possibility of geoengineering, putting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or from the wells of the industry systems or from the ethanol production plants and other sources, inject into old oil wells, increase the production of the oil also. In unminable coal mines, increase the emission of methane gas. In saline aquifer, where they can be precipitated and deposited forever, we can have chemical sequestration process or mineralization of carbon dioxide into minerals. We have oceanic sequestration of deep injection into the ocean and iron fertilization into the tropical ocean so that the biota can increase and eventually settle. And we, of course, biotic sequestration, agriculture and forestry, biofuel plantation, sequestering carbon in soil as organic and inorganic, in wetland restoration. And we also have possibility of carbon capture and reuse. And many biochemists are thinking about converting CO2 directly into the fuel. I think something that ICAR might want to think about it and use it, of course, as an industrial raw material. And combination of all these has many options that we can do to mitigate climate change. But geoengineering, and in Ohio, we have 2 wells, which injects about 100,000 tons of CO2 per year into deep geologic strata, about 1 mile or 2 miles deep, has a question what we call NIMBY syndrome. And the NIMBY syndrome stands for not in my backyard. People are not sure what will happen. Therefore, they are very concerned about it. That brings us to the question of which ICAR is immediately concerned with, limitations of the present food systems. There are many. Failed to end hunger and malnutrition. Obviously, it has not provided adequate, nutritious, and healthy diet, safe food, and it has degraded soils, polluted water, aggravated global warming, dwindled biodiversity, and denuded landscapes. It is also source of 30% of all greenhouse gases. Agriculture alone is globally about 15%, but food system on the whole, everything is about 30%. So global food insecurity, which is a very important issue, we were doing a very good job from 1990 to about 2019. The number of people which are food insecure had decreased to approximately 590 million in December 2019. And it has gone to 820 million, 690 million to 820 million moment. But majority of that, 37.4% of the hunger people is in South Asia, and 34% is in Sub-Saharan Africa. So those are the two areas where the food insecurity persists. India alone, I'll come back to that in a moment, has a very large number of these people. And in addition to 820 million or 0.82 billion food insecure, we have 2 billion people globally which are prone to hidden hunger, malnutrition. The Millennium Development Goals of reducing undernourishment are not met. Will the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, another 8 years, will we able to meet that goal? Right now, it is a questionable. That brings me to the topic of soil health. And soil health, especially of that is the root zone, the top 50 centimeters, so depends on its organic matter content, the humus material, what that gives it a very dark color. The subsoil, especially that of the drier regions, such as northwestern part of India and other regions of the drier part of the world, have the calciferous carbonaceous material of carbonates and bicarbonates, which is another mechanism of carbon sequestration. And we don't talk much about it because the direct impact on crop growth and use efficiency of input is much less. Nonetheless, it's a very important factor of carbon sequestration in soils of the world. And the mechanism, the philosophy, the strategy is to create a positive soil ecosystem carbon budget, which means whatever you put into the soil, by whatever practice you might want to practice, must always exceed the most dominant mechanism of losing carbon from soil, which is erosion, leaching, and decomposition. This is the ideal situation. Mostly under extractive farming practices, small landholder, poor farmers who cannot afford to leave the residue back in the land, we have a situation of negative carbon budget, of negative ecosystem budget. That's why agriculture and management system have created emission to the extent of about 690 gigaton that I mentioned from the beginning of the agriculture. Per capita emission in countries vary. United States is about 16 to 20 metric ton of CO2 equivalent per year. China is catching up, about 8. India is about 2. The world on the whole is about 4.5. And the maximum amount that the humanity can continue to emit and yet limit global warming to 2 degrees centigrade is 2 tons of CO2 per person per year. Therefore, that was the reason I mentioned each one of us is a victim and each one of us is also responsible. We must do something about it. Diet has a very important role to play in this. For example, if you take 5 different diets, and unfortunately, as people get rich, in developing countries especially, the first thing they do is change their diet from vegetarian to more animal-based. Meat lover, approximately 3.3 tons of CO2 per person per year, or 2,600 kilocalories. Average American diet, about 2.5. No beef diet, about 2. Vegetarian diet, 1.7. Vegan diet, 1.5. I have no right or authority or anything to say what everybody should eat, but the science is there to guide us what we should do collectively and individually. Global food waste is another issue, a very important issue. Out of more than 3 billion tons of cereal food grain produced, 1.4 reach no stomach, human or animal. 30 to 40%, sometimes more, especially fruits and vegetables, are wasted. Food waste, when it is avoidable, causes loss of resources, soil, water, energy, nutrients, and incurs adverse impacts in the environment. Therefore, landfills are a very important source of greenhouse gases. As I already mentioned, 1.4 gigaton of food is wasted globally annually. And in India, we have our share of it. And if food waste is a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and United States. We cannot ignore it. The per capita food waste emission in North America is estimated at 60 kilograms of CO2 per person per year. In South Asia, the number, industrialized Asia, the number is 810. In Europe, 680, Latin America, 540, North Africa, 350, Southeast Asia, 350, and Sub-Saharan Africa, 210. Yes, some food waste is inevitable. It will happen. But so much is a crime against humanity and nature. We have to do something about it. That brings me to the question of land degradation, which is a serious problem. In fact, it is very difficult to separate the well-being of humanity from the land. People indeed are mirror image of the land they live on. When people are poor, when they are suffering, they are desperate, and they are miserable, they pass their miseries to the land, and land reciprocates. And this vicious cycle grips the humanity and the land together. And the entry point to break that cycle is agriculture. How to manage land properly through science-based agriculture. Take the case of soil degradation. When we remove more from the soil than what you put back, it degrades soil organic carbon content and depletes nutrients. It degrades soil structure. It leads to loss of soil resilience. It causes decline in ecosystem functions and services. It leads to loss of soil biodiversity and disruption of key processes. And unfortunately, it leads to hunger, malnutrition, political unrest, civil strife, war and insecurity. 35 million refugees estimated between 2014 and 2023. That number has increased. As of 24th of April, because of the problem in East Europe, by 5.5 million refugees out of the country, 7.7 million internally displaced. And this is why I said the 3 C's, one of the C, conflict everywhere, must stop. They cannot continue. Whoever is right, whoever is wrong, the humanity and the land is suffering. Therefore, we must bring about transformation. The transformation of this common 5 Ds: deplete, degrade, destroy, discard, and dominate, and take away from land. 2 5 Rs: reduce, reuse, recycle, regenerate, restore, and return land back to nature. Return some land and water back to nature. Globally, I've been suggesting returning half of the land back to nature. When? By 2100. I have just published an article, I think came out today or yesterday, and its title is Vasudevaya Kutumbakam. Those of you who send me an email, I'll send you a link to that article, and the focus of that is exactly what we're talking today: regenerative agriculture. inspired by eco-innovation, powered by non-carbon energy, driven by a circular economy and green infrastructure, supported by the recarbonization of the terrestrial biosphere as the bedrock of sustainable development. Recarbonization. Why? We lost 690 gigaton of carbon from land globally. 40% of the entire land is under agriculture, globally speaking. It is far too much than we need. Must go back. And by going back, we'll return carbon back to nature. Whatever agriculture we use, the soil must be always continuously covered, minimal soil disturbance, integrated nutrient management, complex farming system, restoring soil carbon so that we produce more from less. The average national crop yield of cereals in India can be doubled. The average national crop yield at a continental level in sub-Saharan Africa can be and should be quadrupled. Rather than too much land, we must have productivity from less land, less water, less fertilizer, less pesticide, less energy, less emission of greenhouse gases, so that we can return out of 5 billion hectares globally, half of it back to nature. That should be our aim. That should be our goal. And we certainly can do it. We have the scientific ability to do it. Translating science into action is something else. Example of nature positive practices, and that's called nature positive, negative emission farming. That's the slogan, negative emission farming, through conservation agriculture, through regenerative agriculture, through agroecology, agroforestry, integration of crops with trees and livestock, practices which create positive soil ecosystem carbon budget, CNPK. C comes before NPK, calcium, magnesium, iron, manganese, whatever else, through integrated soil fertility management. As the soil health goes up, the rate of fertilizer should come down. The focus is not on the rate, the focus is on the efficiency, and the efficiency depends on soil health. Balanced use of nutrients, rather than subsidizing one nutrient such as nitrogen and not P and K, leads to unbalanced application. Therefore, the balanced one. And rather than flood irrigation and sprinkling fertilizer and standing water rice paddies, drip fertigation over a long period of time. Everything spoon feeding of plants, both water and nutrients together through sub-drip fertigation. Precision farming, digital agriculture, artificial intelligence, all those good things. The main thing is the law of return. I know many times we say we are going to have zero input agriculture. As long as you return from the land what you took, that's fine. That's the law of return. The law states that substance we take from nature must be returned to the same place from it was taken, one way or the other. How you do it? That is the site-specific management practice. That's what ICAR is doing. The technical potential of carbon sequestration soil of the world is about 2.5 gigaton of carbon per year. Many people ask, can that compensate the fossil fuel emission? No. Fossil fuel emission last year, even with COVID pandemic disruption, was 10 gigaton. So the maximum soil that the world can do is 25%. Between now and 2100, if the soils of the world are restored and some returned back to nature, soil can put back about 180 gigaton. Vegetation, another 150, together about 330 gigaton, which translates into 157 parts per million drawdown of CO2 from the atmosphere, which, if combined with non-carbon fuel sources, solar in India is gaining momentum, hydro, others, yes, it is possible to limit global warming to 2 degrees through recarbonization of the terrestrial biosphere. That is the key part. How do you translate science into action? In addition to undertaking new research, it's also important to exploit the understanding of whole range of sciences, crops, soils, agronomy, entomology, pathology, and more that we already have, and link these two and work with small landholder farmers. Small landholder, those are the dominant farmers. So that is the key strategy. We should structure economic and legal incentives so that the farmers are encouraged to produce more, so that a great deal more food could be produced, a vast amount of waste could be avoided, and the present and future population could be fed adequately, safely, and nutritiously. That's the key part. It's not simply producing more, it's producing better through science-based agriculture. Those parts of the world which have not done so, people should not adopt the highly processed, highly fat, sugar, meat, and dairy diets that have developed in the recent past and which are so closely linked to unhealthy outcome of the human population. So I'm sometimes disturbed when I hear India and China are increasing meat-based diet by 15% per year. Think again. Yes, moderation is great. Good thing is small quantity can be better, but be careful. Changing dietary habits in many richer societies would also contribute to more generally to a fair and equitable food system and good for the health. Private sector can play a critical role in translating science into action by promoting nature positive agriculture, by increasing access to the inputs, by improving investment in agricultural research, education, and development. I cannot overemphasize the important role that private sector can do. They can indeed help us achieve sustainable development goals, especially when we combine private sector with policymaker, academician, and land managers, international organizations, all working together. Famines are man-made tragedies, largely. We must make famine and mass starvation politically intolerable, morally toxic, ethically unthinkable, humanly unacceptable, and we must bring about the soil health concept and a greener revolution. And the soil health is one health concept. Health of soil, plants, animal, people, ecosystem, and the planet is one and indivisible. Returning land to nature by 2100, half of the current land of agriculture globally. I know India, China, other countries with large population cannot return a lot, but certainly we can use existing properly and return some of the marginal land, steep land, hilly land back to nature. Capacity to produce food, there is no shortage of food or capacity to produce enough food to feed adequately the current and foreseeable population globally. We must be prudent, rational, logical, how to do it. Research on food security to sustainably enhance productivity and resource use efficiency. Soil degradation and then adding chemical fertilizer is not a good combination. We must reduce input, enhance productivity in such a way that adoption of research outcome can be expected to impact the resulting societal interaction in ways that benefit people, planet, and economics, of course, together. Planet is very important. Lastly, I do want to say something about what is happening in many parts of the world at the moment, and we cannot ignore it. Conflict and hunger go together. Hunger and conflicts are mutually reinforcing processes, and they are driven by human greed and political agenda. Sanity must prevail. Effects of war on soil quality are dramatic. Surface sealing, compaction, cratering, trenches and tunnels, dust storm, runoff and erosion, pollution, heavy metal, microaromatic explosive, organophosphorus, nerve agent, dioxin from herbicide, radioactive elements, introduction of organisms lethal to animals and humans, loss of biodiversity, extinction of species, many other things. Therefore, war ravages both the soil and the people. And both soil and people require healing and recovery. Type of soil degradation that can happen and cause human health issues, physical, chemical, biological properties, whether it's a war, whether it's predation, whether it's a civil strife, that changes soil into dirt. But if the soil is managed properly, through peaceful restoration, harmony with nature, soil is a living and life-sustaining entity. And that is the impact that we forget when we see the tanks rolling into the land. And this must stop for the sake of the planet and for the sake of humanity. War has very strong impact on soil health. Whether missiles are fired because of hatred or they're fired because of self-defense and fear, both people and land suffer. War changes soil from a womb for terrestrial life into a tomb of all dead organisms. War turns bonds of soil and life into bondage of slavery and death. And war nails the living, but encourages humanity to worship the dead. There are many heavenly crimes being created. Destruction of the above ground world, ruined cities, disruption of the food chains, deterioration of the welfare of survivors, healing of the social and environmental wounds may depend on the impact of warfare on soil quality. If the soil quality is destroyed, how can humanity heal? And there are many other parts which we need to consider and which agriculture can play a very important role. Indeed, humans create famines and the promise of food in heaven. Humans create drought and the promise of river of milk and honey in heaven. Humans create scarcity and then the promise of plenty in heaven. Humans create deprivation and the promise of angels in heaven. Humanity should wake up, should let everyone live in peace and harmony on earth rather than the promise of good life in heaven. Children, Mahatma Gandhi said, if you want real peace in the world, begin with the children. And Mahatma Gandhi also argued that Mother Earth, Vasundhara, provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. The day the power of love overrules the power of power, we will have peace everywhere else in the world. We can never forgive. Therefore, those who think they are weak, they should try to forgive. And because forgiveness is an attribute of strong, and an honest disagreement about the territorial claims does not matter where, about the land, about the soil, it's a good sign of progress and get on the table, not inside a tank. Lastly, I want to go back to our roots, Maha-Upanishad. Anijam, Paroveti, Ganna, Laghuchetsam, Udar Charitana, to Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. This is mine, that is his, say the small-minded. The wise believe that the entire world is a family. Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Agrawal, colleagues, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful talk, wonderful points. Always, it's a new thing which we learn from you. And today, I think you have given a big box for all of us to digest and to just know, to learn, to act upon many things. Sir, I know you have a very limited time today. You just promised that only 1 hour you will be available. So if you just permit, we can have a few questions.
Sure, I have 20 minutes.
Yes, okay, sir.
Thank
So those questions, let me just read out some of the questions. Sir, can you please suggest what sort of soil policy or education is required for India to sustain the food production and protecting the soil resource for posterity? This question is by Dr. Soma Jaraman.
Thank you. I had a brief discussion with Dr. Mahapatra a few months ago. I was suggesting our children kindergarten alphabet books should be agriculture oriented, should be nature based. We should begin from that. And I do have a copy of a book that was published by ICAR. I don't know whether it's officially out yet or not. That's is focused on that. So somewhere we must increase attraction of the brightest and the best right from the children age. Education part is very important. Education should also reward those who improve land and natural resources. Our policy must be pro-nature, pro-farmer, and pro-agriculture. I think that is the slogan we should promote. And I think over time, it will probably be a generational scale, 20 years or so. If we attracted the best and the brightest to agriculture and to land, natural resource management, I think things will change.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Sir, another question by Dr. B.K. Singh, Director of the CRIDA, that India is committed to reduce 30% of the carbon emissions by 2030. Can you suggest some short-term roadmap to achieve this goal?
Certainly, I had a roadmap both for India and for world. Because of the time, I did not go into the detail, but that is what ICAR should really plan, how to make agriculture a solution. And I think we can do that. 30% emission come from food systems and wastage, low use efficiency of input, degradation of natural resources, they all contribute to emission. On the other hand, better management of land, better agricultural practices will create a negative emission. And agriculture has the capacity to do that. And I think that is what we should focus on. Certainly, I must say improved varieties have a very important role to play. Green revolution varieties were input responsive, short stature, lower biomass, probably root biomass also not very good. So if we can have plants which are producing more biomass, that means harvest index may not be as much as it was for the green revolution varieties, but at the same time it's the biomass we need. And then if we can also include genetic composition in a way that the biomass does not decompose very quickly, it stays in soil for a longer period of time, especially in a hotter climate. It has more lignin and suberin contents and a deeper root system. So it goes in, those will be all very good practices to mitigate global warming.
Thank you, sir. What is the relationship between Earth's carrying capacity and hunger on the planet?
Earth has a very large carrying capacity, but because it has a large carrying capacity does not mean that we must keep increasing the population so we can fulfill the need for everybody. One of the best solution we have is rather than having population of the world at 11.2 billion by 2100, through education of the women and through empowering the women, perhaps population should stabilize at 8 billion or less.
Okay. And yeah, another very interesting question, that is, can aeroponics, hydroponics, soilless cultivation, vertical farming, etc., meet the requirement of the food needs and reduce the degradation of soils and their pressure on the soil health?
Soil is such a precious resource. It has so many uses. Just using it only for agriculture and food production is not a good strategy. I think many cities, mega cities, Delhi, Calcutta, Mumbai, Chennai, all the large cities of the world, we should have a goal, a strategy of soil-less agriculture, aquaponic, hydroponic, aeroponic, artificial soil, artificial media, skyscraper building designed specifically to grow plants, especially the green vegetable and so forth, and aquaculture and the recycling the nutrients in a very hygienic way. In future, the large city, when the urban population is going to increase throughout the world, urban agriculture, soil-less agriculture is the solution, is the option. And we must be focusing on that right now.
Thank you, sir. Can medicinal plants act as diversification option to reduce the greenhouse emissions?
Any plant which produce biomass, any plant which have a deep root system, any system of management that we do not take away plant back from the soil and not return anything is good. So certainly medicinal plants which can be grown on hilly slopes, normally which is not good for agricultural purposes, anything that keep the ground cover is a great thing for soil.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, there are plenty of questions, but because of paucity of time, we will not be able to take all the questions. I will request the chairman of this session, Dr. Mahapatra, who is the Secretary DARE and DG ICAR, to give his viewpoints and what are the strategies we are taking up from the ICAR side related to the soil and the soil restoration. And as you told, the law of return. So how we can return the soil to the nature. So we can listen to his chairman's remarks. So Dr. Mahapatra, sir, please. Sir, please unmute.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal, and profuse thanks to Dr. Professor Ratanlal Saab. Always, it's a pleasure to listen to you, and always you go back richer after your lecture. And I'm sure all those who are attending today, listening to you, more than 100, 200 people, scientists and researchers. So we are all richer by your virtue of your lecture and the presence and the deliberation. Always, you have been very kind, and you have agreed to our request, and you are here. Also, we will physically would be meeting you in another 1 month's time, and we would be interacting with you and learning more from you. And always, you emphasize and re-emphasize some of those points to reinforce in our memory that how important soil is, how important the carbon is, and how we can sequester more and increase, strengthen the long-lived pools, and build onto this the sustainable food systems. And more we listen to you, more we are emboldened to do certainly more than what we are doing at this point in time. And that's the message we have got from your talk. Time is limiting. You did talk about the situation at the global level, soil health, and then all that, and per capita emissions, and diet, and food system, food wastage, and how they are contributing. You did talk about land degradation, the factors which are contributing, and their impacts, and how various different kinds of problems are arising due to on those land degradation, and the transformation strategies which you have mentioned. The 5Ds and 5Rs are really always innovative, and we need to really work on each one of those. That's very important. How do we actually work on 5R to very specifically designing programs and schemes for each one of them? And certainly the complex, rotations, cover crops, and all those which you have suggested. I will not go into those. And similarly, the nature positive practices which you outline. And if we intensify, we are doing quite a bit of, as you rightly said, we have intensified some of those, but it needs real impacts, bigger impacts in years to come. And for that, we need to really plan more and do more. Law of returns, certainly, how do we put back into the soil, what we have taken, or rather put back to nature what we have taken from the nature. And the kind of science that we are doing, how do we really put into action, translate into action. Translating science in action is very important. Crimes and then wars, war and its impact on soil. You have very nicely described those, how war can impact the soil. And then children and impacts of war, famines, and then impacts, and quite a bit of, you have really today gone beyond just a simpler aspect of nature positive or soil system, and then all that. It's gone beyond that. Humanity and a whole lot of things you have talked about. So difficult to summarize in so little time. It's not required. There's no time to really elaborate on those. And need versus greed you have talked about. And I think finally what you said, world is family, Vasundhaiva Kutumbakam, the kind of philosophy India has here actually given to the world. I think that is something which need to be really assimilated, internalized globally. And every religion talks about it, but then in certain situations there is conflict still. And so how do we really do this? But coming back to the point that you have mentioned, some of these actions, the alphabet books, for instance, the roadmap, for instance, I think when you come, sir, we would, really crystallize some of those further. And, how do we have a national mission on soil carbon, for instance? And what could be the components, taking into account all those which are happening, and what else we can include and intensify our efforts so that we have a national mission, built around the carbon. So carbon mission, national carbon mission, soil carbon mission, one can say very precisely. So I'm sure we'll get more support. And in the meantime, I'll ask my colleagues to prepare something base paper on this. And so that a kind of national mission is actually in operation, and putting back residue to the soil is happening only in a fragmented manner. How it becomes part of our carbon trading, as a normal practice, and private comes in. You rightly pointed out, private has a big role to play, and how do we really harness that and partner with the private to enhance our carbon sequestration? More and more, and soil properties build up, and the process it becomes more sustainable. So a whole lot of things are there, sir, and I'm sure all my colleagues would agree that we have learned so much, and we keep learning, and you have been very magnanimous, and I'm sure your guidance will help us, and India can lead the way in regenerative agricultural principles and methods and applications, and show the way, and then also benefit the country to start with and benefit the global community. And those examples can be replicated elsewhere. So profuse thanks to you. We give you a big hand, sir, and welcome to India, in another 1 month's time. See you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for nicely summarizing and giving the viewpoints of what we are doing. And I can again thank Professor Ratnalalji for his excellent talk, and that to give the talk at a very early hour in US. We know we are encroaching upon your time. So I think the lecture has been of great importance to each one of us. And I want to just inform you, sir, the audience included many vice chancellors, many directors, deputy director generals, senior staff, and the senior faculty. And the students also joined, but they joined through other platform, live streaming. So it's attended by many persons. And this lecture series has become very important for the researchers and for the students, for the education purpose. So thank you again, sir, for this excellent lecture. And to the audience, I want to just say that tomorrow again at 11 o'clock in the morning, we have a lecture on the artificial intelligence and the digital agriculture by director of the IIT Jodhpur. So please connect yourself, and already I have sent a link. So thank you all. Good evening to each one of you. And thank you, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.